At 6:30 p.m. on May 14, 1955, a 24-year-old man named Donald Giroux stood next to his friend, 28-year-old Murray Anderson, on the shore of a natural spring in the state of Georgia. The spring was called Radium Springs because literally there was radium in the water. Radium is a naturally occurring, highly radioactive metallic element, but there were such low levels of it in the water that it wasn't really a hazard. However, it made it practically neon blue. Donald and Murray were both members of the US Navy. In their off time, they were recreational scuba divers. Except, back in 1955, recreational scuba diving was totally not safe. You didn't really have access to good equipment. They had to literally make their own diving equipment. And so that's what made it really dangerous. There were sections in Radium Springs that nobody had mapped, and they were gonna go down there and see it for themselves. They donned their amateur equipment and submerged. A few minutes later, Donald and Murray had traveled about 70 feet straight down the water column. Right in front of them was this huge entrance. And this was actually a well-known cavern. While the entrance to the cavern had been sort of mapped out and searched, there were all these little spidery offshoots that had not been explored. They had attached a dive line when they had gone into the spring. It's a 200-foot line, and they carried it with them. But once they were inside of this cavern, all the light completely went away. They had their flashlights, but there's all this silt that began getting kicked up. They could basically only see maybe 6 inches in front of them. They were about to go into this offshoot when Donald suddenly started seeing all these air bubbles coming up against him. There's only one place that an air bubble could be emerging from, and that's from his oxygen tank. Donald grabs Murray and just tries to shake him and sort of signal, hey, I got an issue here, but he had no way of knowing if Murray actually understood. And Donald turned around and held onto that dive line, followed it back up to the surface. He was actually able to fix the issue, and so before long, he had put his equipment back on, back in the water, and following the dive line back down towards the cavern. He just keeps going and going deeper and deeper into the system, and eventually he reaches the very end of the dive line, 200 feet at this point, and there's no Murray. He gets to the bottom of the cave, there's nothing there, he starts feeling the tunnels, there's nothing, and he's thinking, I need to get help immediately. He goes back to the surface and he contacted authorities. 2 commercial divers, along with an entire US Navy dive team, began looking for Murray until 8 a.m. the next morning. When Donald had that malfunction, Murray continued to spool out the dive line, and Murray got all the way to the end of the dive line, 200 feet. Somehow or another, Murray became disconnected from the dive line. And when Donald came back down and got to the end of that dive line and discovered Murray wasn't there, what he didn't know is that Murray actually was just a couple of feet away. He was basically right above him because that's where Murray was ultimately found. And so in Murray's final moments, he just scrambled around trying to find his way out again until he eventually drowned just feet away from his dive line, the very thing that would have brought him to safety.